At the beginning of the 18th century, historian Anders Madison demonstrated that India's share of world economy was 23%, as large as all of Europe put together. It had been 27% in 1700 when the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb's treasury raked in £100 million in tax revenues alone. And by the time British departed India, India's GDP had dropped to just 3%, with high poverty, illiteracy, hunger, and death rates. The reason was extremely simple. For 200 years, India was governed for the benefit of Britain. But before we delve deeper and learn about the greatest crimes of all of history, let's learn about a few significant events that shaped the course of Indian history. The first of those events happened in 1615 when the first British ambassador, Thomas Roe, presented his credentials to the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. When Thomas Roe presented his credentials to the Mughal Emperor, he was a supplicant at the feet of the world's mightiest and the most opulent monarch. The Mughal Empire stretched from Kabul to the eastern extremities of Bengal, and from Kashmir in the north to Karnataka in the south. But less than a century and a half later, this Mughal Empire was in a state of collapse. And this brings us to the second event that shaped the course of Indian history: the Nadir Shah Invasion and the sacking of Delhi. In 1739, the Mughal capital, the city of Delhi, was pillaged and burned over 8 long weeks. Gold, silver, jewels worth 500 million rupees were seized, along with the fabled peacock throne. There were 50,000 corpses littered on the streets of Delhi. It is said that when Nadir Shah and his forces returned home, they had stolen so much from India that all the taxes were eliminated in Persia for the next 3 years. Amidst the ensuing anarchy and chaos, the Marathas asserted themselves at the expense of the central authority. But then came the final nail in the coffin: the Battle of Plassey, 1757. In 1757, under the command of Robert Clive, the English East India Company won a famous victory in Plassey over a ruling Nawab, Siraj-ud-Dowlah of Bengal. And the victory was attained through a combination of superior artillery and the backstabbing betrayal of the Nawab by one of his closest nobles, Mir Jafar. And after the battle, Robert Clive was soon able to transfer the princely sum of £250 million in today's money from Bengal's treasury to the company's coffers in England as the spoils of the conquest. The Battle of Plassey was followed by Battle of Buxar in 1764, where a young and a weak Mughal emperor, Shah Alam II, was browbeaten into issuing a Diwani that replaced his own revenue officials in the provinces of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa with the East India Company. And it was for the first time now that an international corporation with its own private army became the official revenue collecting enterprise, and India would never be the same again. The India that the British East India Company conquered was no primitive or a barren land, but the glittering jewel of the medieval world. Nearly every kind of manufacture or product known to the civilized world had long been produced in India. India was a far greater industrial and manufacturing nation than any in Europe. India's textiles, her silk, her exquisite jewelry, her metals and gold were famous all over the civilized world. India had great engineering works, great merchants, businessmen, and bankers. Not only was India the greatest shipbuilding nation, but India had great commerce and trade by land and sea both, which extended to all known civilized countries. Such was the India that the British found when they came. In the next few episodes of this series, we will talk about how the greatest tribes in India flourished and why South Asians need to learn from their own mistakes in history. It was Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, who orchestrated many of India's famines, who once said, "The farther you look into the past, the farther you look into the future." Hope this series makes you question India's traditional history books that have so far taught us to address these criminals as lords and his excellencies. There's a lot to ponder, not just in history, but also in philosophy, economics, and international affairs. So subscribe to this channel and press on the bell icon so that you're notified whenever the next video is uploaded. Good luck, take care, and stay safe.